Good morning and welcome to Elevenses with Kevin Williams, survival skills rider training. I'm not quite sure what happened to my startup video there, which normally introduces the show. For some reason it decided not to run, even though it was set up 10 minutes or so ago. Anyway, not to worry. Hopefully everything will go smoothly today. It looks a little bit jerky at the moment, which it shouldn't be, as I'm on Ethernet connection here. Right, so where are we? Well, we're back in London after a slightly unscheduled week's holiday up in Scotland, where astonishingly we had some really rather nice weather. A couple of dull days, a bit of rain overnight, but actually some really, really lovely sunshine. So feeling refreshed and fit for the coming month of September as we're into autumn. Let's see what we've got for you over the next few days. Well, first of all, let me just give you a heads up on what's happening in the survival skills world over the next few days. Now, last call, because it is this evening, it's September's live online talk event. It's on riding systems, what they are and why we need them to apply them systematically. I will be talking, of course, about the police system. I'll also be suggesting that it's not necessarily the easiest to use, although what I won't be doing is telling you that you shouldn't be using it. What I'm suggesting is that you think about what a system's meant to achieve, and that'll actually help you understand what they're all about. Anyway, that's tonight, 7th of September. That's at 8 p.m. Tickets are still available till about 6 o'clock this evening, when the booking system will shut down, so I can actually get on with sorting the show out. £5 for that. Do come along if you can possibly join me. I have sold a bunch of tickets already for that. There are some left still. Looking further ahead to October, the live online talk event for that month is going to be on the science of being seen again, but this time it's one of the in-depth investigations into a specific part of science being seen. And this time I'll be looking at the difference between visibility and conspicuity, two words that we bandy around quite a lot in road safety and motorcycle safety particularly, and explain the difference between them. And we'll also be talking about camouflage, how it works and what you can do to avoid camouflaging yourself. So that goes out Wednesday the 5th of October. That will also be at 8 p.m. and again tickets are at £5. If you want to book either of those events, as I say, you have just a few minutes left, or well, a few hours left to book the tonight's event. A little bit longer for the one a month ahead, of course. You can find the link just popping up on the comment stream below. And do come along and join me for either of those talks, or of course you can come along to both of them. One final point about those: don't forget, if you can't make it live to any of these talks, you can watch them up for around 72 hours after the live presentation, so you can catch up if you want to. Right, okay, so those are the two talk events. Now I'm also going to be appearing, bringing Science of Being Seen, the stand, to the Emergency Services Day, which is happening on Saturday the 24th of September, so a couple of weeks time, and it will be taking place behind Rye Police Station, which is in the middle of the town. The address is on the header there. It's a Tunbridge postcode. So do have a look at that. I'll give you some more information on that as soon as I know what's happening there. That's being organised as we speak, but my attendance is now confirmed for that. Right, so back to the news stories for the day. What have we got for you? Well, first of all, on Saturday, hundreds of motorbike and scooter riders in Paris protested against the introduction of new parking fees for petrol-powered 2- and 3-wheeled vehicles in the French capital. Now, previously, of course, they've gone uncharged, but on Thursday, the 1st of September, those charges came in. The aim is to reduce noise and pollution. Parking for electric motorcycles actually does remain free. Now, that's in complete contrast, of course, to the similar scheme that's being rolled out in Hackney in London, and more on that in a moment. So the parking fees fulfill a campaign promise by the Parisian mayor Anne Hidalgo. They were originally set to be introduced in January, but the measure was delayed as Hidalgo was making a bid for the French presidency this spring. Now, predictably enough, the responses to these charges fall into two camps. Paris's conservative opposition have called the motorbike parking fee plan a new tax, and they say it will not reduce congestion. Motorcyclists generally, of course, are against the charges too. Pensioner Hervé Yahanin, he said that he was totally against the measure and that he might as well take the car to come into Paris now. And he said, so who knows, we'll have even more traffic jams. This measure is really totally inappropriate. Architect Sylvain Guite, he said that he just paid the parking fee, and whilst the impact is financial, he says that after that, he believes the goal is to kick out all types of vehicles from Paris. Antoine Coulis, a 27-year-old student, said the only option left for us will be to let go of our motorbikes, but as things stand now, it's not easy to do everything by bicycle in Paris. But on the other hand, of course, groups representing cyclists and pedestrians welcomed the move, saying it's long overdue. Now, in recent years, Hidalgo has actually constructed a whole network of new bike lanes and increased parking fees for cars, all in a bid to steer Parisians and commuters towards more environmentally friendly transport options. Now, I did mention that Hackney are planning some parking charges as well, and the net result of that is a parking ride protest. Now, unlike the Paris charges, Hackney plans to charge for all bikes, all two-wheelers and three-wheelers, whether they are petrol or electric powered. And these charges will apply whether you park in a residence bay or whether you park in a street side casual parking bay. And importantly, if you park in a parking bay, there will be a 4-hour time limit on parking your motorcycle, and that of course means it will be next to impossible to use motorcycles to commute into the borough. So this is clearly not a charge based on cleaning up the air in the borough, as the council claims. It's a transparent attack on motorcycling, full stop. And if you think it can't happen in your hometown, well, take a sort of note of what's going on in Paris, take a note of what's happening here in London at the moment, and think again, because what happens in London generally transfers outwards to other boroughs. Think bus lanes if you want a positive example. Now, that's why there is a protest ride, of course, and that'll be on Saturday the 10th at 12 midday. So you can see where that's happening on the banner there. Right, okay. Clive and Terry have both looked in. Good morning, Terry. A Just Eat delivery rider has not only lost his job here in Swindon, but he's now facing a 150 hours of unpaid work under a 12-month community order, and he's been given a 15-month ban from riding. Why did this happen? Well, he was found guilty of hitting a pedestrian whilst riding on the pavement to avoid a road closure. He will also have to pay a £300 contribution to the prosecution's costs at the rate of £30 a month, and he'll have to take an extended retest to get his licence back. Thales Santos Silva was delivering food on a Honda CB600 in Swindon back in August last year when he rode down the pedestrian footpath. Now, he was apparently confronted by a man whose children were playing nearby, and there was an argument. And Santos Silva then continued along the footpath, and he said it was said that he gave the man a glancing blow with his handlebars, which caused unspecified injuries. Now, Brazilian national Santos Silva had previously pleaded guilty to dangerous driving and driving without business use insurance, and he had been banned under an interim disqualification since May. But the case, obviously, regarding the incident with the pedestrian took longer to come to a conclusion. Now, he claimed that the pedestrian had threatened him and that he hadn't hit him at all, but he'd actually collided with a bollard or a cone. But when he appeared at Swindon Crown Court earlier this month, the court actually heard that a number of motorcycles had been using the pavement to skip the road closure. Now, the defence claims are actually quite interesting because his solicitor, one Rebecca McKnight, she told the court that her client was working under huge time pressures from his job for Just Eat. These delivery style jobs are monitored in terms of the time you take to make these deliveries. It does explain to an extent why Mr. Santos Silva behaved in the way he did that day. Well, I'd say it's absolutely true, but when she says that he was unaware of another route that he could take to do that delivery, I actually do find that very hard to credit, as virtually all these riders are using navigation apps to get from A to B. Now, it's easy enough to find a legal route around a road closure, and in fact, if you use Waze, something I'll be talking about in a minute, actually, again, another unrelated story, Waze will flag up closed routes if they have been reported, and they will find you an alternative legal route if that closure is registered on the system. Interestingly, as she also claimed that though he was insured for personal use, it was a lack of knowledge that was to blame for him not having business insurance on his CB600. I'm a little bit surprised he was actually using a CB600 for delivery work anyway, as the fuel costs would be fairly prohibitive. And so I'm wondering if actually he'd just skipped the business insurance due to the cost. It's no coincidence that most food delivery drivers are using a moped or 125. That is speculation. It's entirely down to me. Yeah, it's a bit of a question as why anybody would use a 600 to do food deliveries in London. But the message is clear: don't ride along pavements, don't have confrontations with pedestrians, and don't ride into them whilst you're riding off. And Kevin has looked in. Morning, Kevin. Good to see you too. Right, okay, so some bad news though, involving a senior crash investigator and a Metropolitan Police motorcyclist. Now, this story is just a couple of weeks old, but he was killed riding a motorcycle on duty near Hertford last month. The crash happened on Thursday, August the 18th. It was at 9:25 in the morning, and the reports indicate that although police and paramedics attended, PC Dan Golding died at the scene. Now, one press report suggested he was on a livery police bike, but the policememorial.org.uk website says he was actually riding an unmarked police motorcycle at the time of the collision. And he was said to be on duty, but not responding to a live incident or taking part in an active operation. The incident also involved a Renault traffic van, and it took place on the B158. Now, I happen to know this road. It's not that far from me, and I have used it for the odd training session, and there is a reason I use it for training. It's because it's narrow and it has some really nasty junctions, so it's a really good opportunity to get over to trainees that losing speed on roads like this is really important, and watching for drivers who won't see you coming. The driver of the van, a 46-year-old man, he was arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving and was released under investigation. Detective Sergeant Mark Dollard from the Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire and Hertfordshire Serious Collision Investigation Unit says that officers are still investigating the crash, and he says they're determined to conduct thorough inquiries to establish how the collision occurred, and of course they are looking for witnesses. Anybody with dash cam footage around the time of the incident can drop the police a line. And PC Goulding had apparently served with Surrey Police and Hampshire Constabulary before he transferred to the Met. He was a senior crash investigator and a leading advocate of the bike safe team. It's actually been a bad couple of days for motorcyclists generally. A motorcyclist died on Saturday in a collision with an ambulance on the A428 between Althorpe and Northampton. Now, this happened around 6 p.m. and the rider, a 37-year-old man from Northampton, was pronounced dead at the scene. There's no word on whether the ambulance crew or any passengers in the ambulance were injured, and it's not clear whether the ambulance was responding to an emergency or just moving normally down the road. The Northants police, of course, have said that officers would like to hear from anyone who may have witnessed the incident or may have dash cam footage of the actual collision or the vehicles prior to the incident. And in yet another story, the police in Norfolk and Suffolk have stopped a biker on the A14 near Bury St Edmunds. This was on Sunday, as he was recorded at riding at 147 miles per hour, which of course is more than double the speed limit for that road. And after he was stopped, checks revealed that the rider only had a provisional license, which of course also means he had no insurance for that particular machine. And not entirely surprisingly, the police promptly tweeted this picture of the bike as they confiscated it. Now, okay, what's Terry got to say? Terry has guilty as charged for using footpaths to avoid road closures, but only on vacant footpaths. Yeah, it's a difficult one. You know, it's illegal. There's no argument about that. You can't even claim it's technically illegal or you shouldn't do it. You know, it's a must not do. However, I would also be telling porkies if I said that I hadn't on one or two occasions skipped around a jam using the pavement cautiously to get around it in my dispatch days. So in my bad courier days. Right, okay, don't forget, well, I've still got that banner running, that should be off by now. If you've got any comments, questions, anything you want to say, do drop me a line and I will try to get to you during the show. If I can't do it during the show, I will respond afterwards. And if you want to set a reminder, the show goes out live on Wednesdays and Sundays, normally. Very occasionally I do a recorded show, and even more occasionally, as I did while I was up in Scotland and I was out enjoying the sunshine, I miss a show. Do set a reminder, and if you can't catch it live, you can always get it here later on Facebook, or more reliably over on my YouTube channel, Survival Skills UK. Don't forget that all important UK though at the end. Right, everything's a bit skippy this morning. I know they're doing work on the broadband outside at the moment. If you can hear digging noises, and that's what it's all about. So maybe the broadband is a little bit slow at the moment as they get it fixed. Right, okay. Now, I guess Kevin says allegedly he's never travelled above 70 miles per hour. Yes. Well, there we go. Another one where, again, the rules are clear. Now, carrying on with the sort of motorcycling news, last show I reported how a motorcycle trainer and his trainee were the victims of an attempted bike-jacking incident in Edinburgh, and since then there have been two more, but unfortunately successful bike-jackings. The 17-year-old was forced off his moped at knife point, and in Cleveland a 47-year-old man was forced to drop his 125, which was then stolen by a gang. Now, police do actually get a bit of a hard time with many people thinking that they are simply not interested in bike crime. So I am pleased to report some very positive results. Now, in Edinburgh, where that attempted bikejacking happened, I just mentioned, Operation Soteria, which has been seeking to identify and target those involved in motorcycle theft and associated antisocial behaviour, has had some very positive results. Since June, inquiries have led to the arrest of no less than 35 individuals with significant links to motorcycle crime, and they have executed 5 warrants, and police in that time have actually recovered 131 motorcycles with a value totaling over £600,000. So hats off, absolutely hats off to Edinburgh police who are tackling what appears to be a pretty significant problem, which explains, of course, why motorcyclists were demonstrating on the steps of the Parliament building up there some weeks back. On a smaller scale, but still a successful response to a recent spate of motorcycle thefts in the Eastbourne area, four people have been arrested in connection with those bike thefts, and officers say they have been conducting inquiries into identifying suspects, and they will continue to work hard and trace further suspects and offences, and they are thanking members of the community for relaying information to us that they've seen on social media. So, you know, there is a habit of putting up pictures of stolen bikes, but possibly more importantly, there are also pictures of bikes which have been dumped, possibly by thieves who are waiting to see if they have a tracker on them. But this information is clearly getting back to the police, and it is having some very positive effects. So that's really good to hear. So what have we got? A couple of comments here. Kevin says the bust in Eddington. I don't think I know that one, Kevin. Do send me a link later or something, and I'll have a look at it and see if it can go up in next show, perhaps. And Terry says 2 police in New Zealand in Canterbury have suffered injuries due to issues with road surface irregularities. Well, tell me all about road surface irregularities. We're having plenty of those. Oh, Kevin's just corrected himself, saying it was Edinburgh. Right, thanks very much there, Kevin. Yes, it was an excellent result. Let's give the police the credit they deserve when they deserve it. So here is a story still on the police theme. Do you use Waze when you're navigating? Well, I tend to. I have to admit, I do have a couple of apps, but Waze tends to be my go-to one, largely because it tends to reroute in real time depending on traffic problems. But have you spotted those little icons suggesting there may be police around? Do you slow down when you see one? Well, sorry, police appear to think that you will slow down, and that's why traffic police in the county have been marking their positions on the app to imply they are stationed by the roadside even when their patrol vehicles are actually moving. The road policing team for Surrey announced their tactic in a tweet on the official @Surrey Road Cops account just a few days ago, when they said, "We definitely don't drop police markers on Waze at random points on our patrol. Nope, never." And then attached the winking emoji to it to indicate that the opposite might be true. And then they added, "It's an easy way to get drivers to slow down on our roads. Thanks @Waze." The force claimed the tactic works perfectly by encouraging drivers to slow down. But according to one press report, motorists have been left fuming by what they called a deception. Responses accusing the force of creating phantom units, putting false information on the app, lying, and one even said it was altering computer records to deceive other users, which is a fanciful flight of imagination, I think, there. The police Twitter account responded that its location alerts were technically not false, as officers were there at that very specific point in time when they uploaded their location to Waze, and nowhere on Waze does it say the patrol has to be stationary. Now, they suggested that it actually works around 10 to 20 minutes before other road users report the patrol isn't actually there and the marker gets duly removed from Waze. And they also said they've been doing it for years, which rather begs the question, of course, why admit it now? Okay, so don't forget, if you want to support the show, if you enjoy the presentation, you do have the ability to drop me some support. A cup of tea or something is always welcomed. That's over on my coffee page. The link is there on screen. Do head over there, do drop me a cuppa, and if you do, what you'll find is that you actually open up access to around 800 better biking articles, so you get quite a bit for your money. Do head over there if you possibly can and see what there is to see. All right, okay. Any other comments? We've got one comment that's popped up. Kevin says, actually, alleged deceptive actions are arguably unethical, whether by offenders or police. Yes, I mean, I can see what you mean. Having said that, I kind of think that, you know, as the police vehicle was actually there, is it really deceptive? I think, you know, personally it doesn't bother me. I'm not in the least bit worried about it. I think if it gets a few nutters to think a bit twice, I can't see a problem with that, frankly. Right, so onto the weather. There's a favourite British topic. Now, we know what happened through our 3 months of summer. We had wall-to-wall sunshine and we had a significant drought. As I mentioned a couple of shows ago, I passed down by Buell Water in Kent, Sussex, and the reservoir looks like a bit of a puddle at the bottom of the valley at the moment, or it did a couple of weeks ago. Hopefully the recent downpours have filled it up a bit, but the bad news is that this weather looks set to continue for the UK at least for the next 10 days or so. Now, we don't actually experience hurricanes here in the UK, but we do feel their effects. Sometimes because these powerful atmospheric disturbances caused by these vast storms steer other weather systems our way, or maybe because the hurricane itself passes directly over us as a post-tropical storm. Now, so far this year, the Atlantic hurricane season, which started early this summer and goes on till the end of October, has actually been extremely quiet. But September has actually seen 2 named storms. So let's give you a bit of a photo, and you can see here the first of those named, or one of those named storms. It's down here in the bottom corner. There it is. That is Hurricane Danielle. There's the UK just on the edge of the picture there, and you can see the low pressure zone here, which has been causing all our rain. Now, Danielle, currently out in the Atlantic there, was classified as a Category 1 hurricane. That is a storm displaying maximum sustained winds of 90 miles per hour, and those hurricane force winds extended outwards up to 25 miles from the center, and tropical storm force winds, which are not quite so powerful, extending up to 115 miles from the center of the storm. Now, in the Atlantic, hurricanes often form to the west to the west of the coast of Africa, and what they do is they move westwards through the southern part of the North Atlantic, just north of the equator really, and they head towards Central and North America. Now, some of these storms will pass directly over the Caribbean islands and into the Caribbean Sea itself. Others tend to make a turn to the north, and some of those make landfall, of course, along the coastline of the US, with the results that we often see on television. But what many people seem to be unaware of is that many more hurricanes never make it to land, and they actually turn around in the middle of the Atlantic, and as they get caught in the global flow of what they do is they start to track northeast, which means that they are steered towards Europe. Now, as these hurricanes pass over the cooler sea in the North Atlantic, they start to lose their characteristic hurricane structure. So the what you can see on the picture there is the distinctive eye in the middle of the hurricane. They will lose that tight banding and that hurricane eye, but they will remain particularly powerful storms in many cases. And that means there is definitely a chance of strong winds when a post-tropical storm arrives, and significant rainfall. Now, the question is, where is it going to go? And if you'd have asked me yesterday morning, I would have told you what the weather reports were suggesting was that Danielle is moving to the northeast. It's apparently, at the time, it was headed for the British Isles, and it would have turned into a sort of powerful post-tropical storm as this low pressure system, which is currently directing rain over us, drifts off into Europe. And in fact, the Irish Met Office did actually issue a yellow rain warning yesterday, but the very latest forecast from the US Hurricane Advisory Center from just an hour or so ago this morning, and that's what you can see on screen at the moment, suggests that the hurricane will actually fall off the several hundred miles off the coast of Ireland, and then it'll turn and head southeast towards Portugal instead. So that's a complete change in the forecast in 24 hours. So obviously, with the forecast like this changing on a day-by-day basis, it really is worth keeping an eye on what's going on the weather forecast. You may not want to go to the Hurricane Advisory Centre, but do keep an eye on the BBC Met or the Met Office or something similar. Now, just behind it and gathering force at the moment is another tropical storm expected to become a hurricane. This is Earl. Now, that one's also forecast to hook round to the northeast and head in our general direction in a week or so. So when that one approaches, I'll update you if it looks bad. And there is even a third area which could form a tropical storm, which is currently developing off the African coast. So personally, I'm just hoping for a dry gap in the storms, because I've got 2 days training planned for the Peak District next week, and I really don't want it to rain if it's at all possible. Now, on the back of that previous story on the hurricanes, of course, I couldn't help but have a chuckle at the timing of the latest press release from Oxford Products, because what they've just done is launched a new range of mesh jackets. And if you couldn't think of a less appropriate time to do it, when it's raining and the temperatures drop, that's probably it. Now, to quote, this is the Arizona jacket, and there is a matching pair of trousers, and it says they're uniquely focused products designed to deal with one specific challenge: heat. The air mesh combo does away with every piece of material that could block airflow from reaching the areas of your body which suffer most in hot weather. This enables you to capitalize on the slightest movement of air to help cool your core and provides immense breathability. Yes, okay. As I read the press release yesterday afternoon, the temperature outside had plummeted from the July and August highs, of course, to the sort of low 20s. Thunder was rumbling around, and it was actually dumping torrential rain outside, so perfect timing for a mesh jacket. If you want one for the wardrobe, the Arizona jacket on screen will set you back about £100. There's a slightly cheaper but similar mesh jacket called the Spartan Air, which is £80. But do be aware that both are only A rated to the C standard, which I personally would say is probably okay for low speed city centre riding, 20-mile-an-hour limits and that kind of thing. But personally, if I was going to use anything out on the open road, I'd be aiming for at least a double A standard. So will I be rushing out to get one? Well, probably not. I don't think I'm going to need one for training again this year. I have had a couple of hot days on the bike, and it's entirely possible, of course, you'll find them rather cheaper in a couple of weeks' time in the sales. Right, so John is asking what was the Facebook page for Surrey Police. It was actually their Twitter account, John. I don't have the link, but it's, hang on a minute, I'll just scroll back. It's at Surrey Road Cops. So that should be that's the official Twitter account. There. That's the one. I want to go and have a look. That should help you find it. Right, okay. And Terry says the police non-presence at Marcus sounds like something out of Catch-22. Well, yes. I'd be honest, I'd rather they told you they were there than hide behind a big hedge until you spot them too late. Anyway, right. Today's final piece is the usual sort of better biking tip, and over the last couple of weeks I've introduced you to two of the UK's favourite bike crashes, and we're to that after missing out last week because I was on holes, and we're on to number 8 in the list of 10. We're starting from the bottom and running up to the favourite crash, of course. And this one is running into the back of another vehicle. Now, surely riders don't run into the backs of other vehicles very often, I hear you ask, but unfortunately, these stats tell otherwise. In a study carried out in the Peak District in the late 1990s, for example, no less than 8% of vehicles accidents involved motorcycles running into the backs of slowing vehicles. And this is a mainly rural area, remember. So that's about 1 in 12, and that's in a place where junctions are relatively infrequent. In urban areas, it's an even more common incident, and recent studies don't show that the data there has changed at all. So why do riders hit the backs of other vehicles? Well, sometimes it's as simple as not anticipating a stationary vehicle may be at the side of the road. Now, some years ago, a riding buddy of mine, he was actually an advanced rider at the time too. He was on his way out to meet some mates for a breakfast run early on a Saturday morning when he came around a corner in a 50 limit on the edge of a town, and what he found parked in front of him was the milk delivery van stationary at the side of the road. The impact was hard enough to snap the forks off the machine, and he was lucky that he only spent a couple of months in hospital, and frankly he was very lucky not to have killed himself in that particular crash. And simply, what can you say about that? Well, he forgot that there might be a stationary vehicle on a medium fast road parked outside some houses, and then had failed to anticipate that he didn't take evasive action in time. Now, there was no evidence that he was riding at an excessive speed, but what we do know is that when we're taken completely by surprise by something like this appearing in front of us, it can derail our normal reactions, and then we freeze or we panic. Now, sometimes the crash comes when a rider is taken completely by surprise because the vehicle in front slows or turns at a junction. And in fact, I myself, one of my crashes, the one that caused the only actual broken bone I've ever had on a motorcycle crash, I made exactly that error. Now, I'll tell you what happened. I was following three vehicles. It was a wet road. I'd actually just had the bike recovered and put together after a previous crash had damaged the front end of the bike. It had a completely new set of forks, new front wheel, new disc brake, and it had new pads, and it had a new Japanese tyre fitted. Bear all that in mind because this is quite important. What happened was this: the first of the three cars slowed and indicated to turn right at the crossroads. Now, I knew the crossroads was there. Nothing there was a surprise. The second slowed, moved to the inside of the first car. Again, nothing of a surprise there. I was expecting both the second and the third vehicle to go straight on. But the second car then hit the brakes very hard indeed and turned left without any kind of signal. The third car, which was close behind the second car, then did an emergency stop to avoid running back of it, and it came to a halt next to the first car. So now the entire road in front of me was blocked. Now, even though I was actually a fair distance behind, it caught me completely by surprise. So, of course, what I did was I did the usual panic grab of the front brake. And even though I had plenty of room to stop, the new discs with the new pads didn't do anything. When they did, it was the front tyre's turn not to do anything. It just slid, and I basically locked up front wheel and dropped the bike. Now, the interesting thing was that the bike, in fact, slid through the narrow gap between the two cars, so it was actually almost undamaged. I wasn't, because I slid at a slightly different trajectory, and I actually slid into the back of one of the parked cars, and that broke my arm, and that put the end to my cricket season there and then. So what went wrong? Well, I simply never expected to find the road completely blocked by stationary vehicles in front of me. And in the circumstances, I was clearly not at an adequate following distance because I panic braked. I just didn't have enough room for the conditions. So what else can be a problem? Road surfaces can be an issue too. Now, I was following a rider, and he was clearly not on his home turf because he was sort of looking around and riding a little bit erratically. But we were in a housing estate and approaching a roundabout. There was nothing coming that he could see and nothing coming that I could see. So obviously what he wasn't expecting was that the car to brake fairly about 20 meters short of the roundabout itself. Now, he braked hard behind the car because he was too close behind the car. And just as he got hard on the brakes, what he discovered was the reason that the car had braked itself. And the answer to that was it was a fairly vicious speed bump in the middle of the lane. And he hit it hard, he lost control, and he was in the process of falling off when he hit the back of the car. Now, once again, there was a failure to anticipate that a vehicle might not do what he expected, and he didn't have enough following distance to deal with that issue. And this is something I've seen many riders do over the years. I remember picking a rider up when I was a courier. A car stopped again in front of him. He braked, and he braked straight onto the wet manhole cover, which just popped out from under the braking car. Front end locked up, crashed into the back of the car. So in each and every case, the rider wasn't expecting the road ahead to suddenly force him to slow down. And so it's important, again, that we don't think about what we want to happen, what maybe even should happen, but what could happen. It's not likely that a car turning right will suddenly have a stationary vehicle stopped next to it, blocking the entire lane in front of us, but it can happen. Similarly, the road surface issues really in this day and age shouldn't be a big surprise. We should be factoring that in. The more we focus on what usually happens, though, the more likely we are to miss what's unlikely to happen. You'd say that parked cars round houses are pretty high likely factor, aren't they? You may not expect a milk delivery van, perhaps, but certainly you'd expect parked cars or delivery, a car delivery van or something. Other delivery companies are available, and you probably wouldn't be entirely surprised to find traffic calming measures in a housing estate these days. But the problem is that we simply don't expect things like that. Why did I fall off? Well, I wasn't far into my riding career, several years, admittedly, but it was one of my first crashes. So motorway pile-ups, again, think about why they happen. Again, it's because people are following too close, but mostly because they simply aren't expecting the traffic in front to brake suddenly when they are already a bit too close. And there's a concertina effect. Every vehicle puts the brakes on later than the one in front, and sooner or later somebody in that queue runs out of following distance. And that's one reason that I avoid following heavy vehicles on motorways. If I possibly can in the car, I get out from behind them, because at least it gives me a fighting chance of seeing some distance ahead. But I'm always horrified when I see car drivers, but even motorcyclists do it, sit 2 or 3 vehicle lengths behind a van or a lorry doing 60 odd miles per hour. I would never ever do that. We can use lateral position sometimes to get warnings of what's coming on, but something to be aware of on motorways these days is if cars are using sort of the adaptive cruise control, they may not detect a motorcycle if it's positioned right out to the edge of the lane. So that is something to consider for the future. Look for things like anti-skid surfaces too. If you see an anti-skid surface ahead, anticipate other people have got it wrong there. That's why there's an anti-skid surface. Riders, unfortunately, too often do either lose control when braking hard behind vehicles that they haven't anticipated will slow down, or lose. A loss of control is right up there in the sort of the accident stats factors, but the reason is often that a vehicle in front of them has braked suddenly or stopped completely. Think about why a vehicle turning left might stop. Well, the new changes to the highway code means that a driver should give way to anybody crossing the road. The highway code says they must give way. Well, whether they will or not is anybody's guess, but we should really be alert for the possibility of a vehicle turning left and stopping. Anything else that will cause a vehicle to stop suddenly? Well, my favourite, of course, is the cheap petrol on the other side of the road, with the top-ups of cars and vans and things being so expensive at the moment. If you see a petrol station on 3 or 4p a litre cheaper than normal, most people are going to fill up if they've got anything like a half-empty tank. And, again, there are numerous reasons that people make decisions and don't do as we expect. I'll finish off with just the other collision that I had where I hit the back of a car, and it was actually in Luxembourg. And what happened was we had priority at the junction, but the French driver in front had been confused because each successive junction had alternating priority. She'd lost the plot on this one. She saw a motorcycle coming from her right. She applied the priority to the right rule, even though the priority was with us, and she stopped. I actually managed to bring the bike to a halt with a reasonable amount of room in front of me. I wasn't totally fazed by that maneuver, but unfortunately the Belgian driver who'd been tailgating me actually ran into the back of my bike and pushed me forward as I was stopped into the rear of the French car. So as you can imagine, that was a fairly complicated insurance claim. Couple of comments here. Kevin says a wandering mind is a factor in some rear enders. Well, I would certainly agree that, you know, if you're not actually focused on what can happen properly, yes, you can take a moment or two to identify the fact everything's slowing down. I would certainly say that's probably a factor in a lot of motorway crashes. And he also mentions the overuse of rear observation. Well, yeah, okay. Back in the day when I was a CBT DAS instructor, when I started, riders had to ignore mirrors. They actually had to do a full check by looking right behind them, turn their head right round to get a rear view. I can remember saying to a rider, as he did one of those, when there was a sort of emergency stop situation required, you know, forget the rear observation, just get on with stopping the bike. Sometimes you just have to take it on trust that the people behind you will stop. So yeah, well-timed rear observation. Don't do it when you need to brake. Do it before you need to brake. Check what the situation is before things get complicated. And Terry says sitting behind a moving vision blocker, yep, that's the term I use for anything that we can't see through, is bonkers if we don't absolutely do it. Yes, if we can possibly get out from behind it, it's a very, very good idea. Right, it's been a bit of a longer show this morning than normal. I had a couple of stories that I had hung over from the one I missed, which I wanted to get in. So that is it for today. Thank you very much again for looking in, and do remember the next live online talk event is coming up in just a few hours. It's at 8 p.m. this evening. Do look in on that if you possibly can. The one following that is in a month's time, and there is that event in Rye to look forward to on Saturday. The date is on the preamp.